As Warthog Defense reported, Ukrainian attacks on the Crimean Peninsula were part of a broader operation against Russian military capacity in the area. During an attack on Simferopol airport, the Ukrainian Defense Forces destroyed MI-8 and MI-24 attack helicopters. The damage to the aircraft is confirmed by satellite images that the Aviavector community published. According to the satellite images, 2 helicopters were destroyed on the airport grounds, where an explosion occurred on August 30th, and thick black smoke was seen, as a result of a drone attack carried out by the Defense Forces of Ukraine. The attack on the airfield took place around 06:30 a.m., when Russian monitoring services started reporting drone activity heading towards Simferopol. Meanwhile, according to an image from August 22nd, it can be noted that at that time the Russians had concentrated 5 MI-8 helicopters, 1 AN-26, 3 MI-24 helicopters, and 1 Tu-134 UBL on a relatively small area, which in the event of a massive attack could have resulted in significantly greater losses. It should be noted that initially, after the explosion on the airport grounds, there were reports of damage to aviation fuel tanks. However, this information proved to be false. As of today, MI-8 helicopters are actively used by the Russian armed forces and remain the main transport helicopter of the military, serving in large numbers. The exact modification of the destroyed helicopter is currently unknown. Despite this, the MI-8 is used by the Russians for various tasks, from transporting personnel to carrying out strike operations, performing air defense duties, and hunting Ukrainian surface drones. However, the effectiveness of such interceptions is low. For example, on December 31st, 2024, the Ukrainian Defense Forces became the first in the world to destroy an aerial target with a missile launched from a sea drone. The targets were 2 Mi-8 helicopters, which were shot down using R-73 air-to-air missiles. Meanwhile, Mi-24 helicopters are currently used less actively due to the availability of their logical replacements in the form of the K-52 and Mi-28. As a result, the tasks of the Mi-24 mostly consist of attempts to defend against Ukrainian aerial and surface drones. Warthog Defense previously reported that as a result of a special operation by the Security Service of Ukraine at the Kirovska military air base in Crimea, a Russian Pantsir-S surface-to-air missile and anti-aircraft artillery system and 3 helicopters were destroyed. In the past 2 weeks, SBU's Alpha units reported destroying 20 tanks, 41 armored vehicles, 94 artillery and MLRS systems, 16 air defense systems, 8 electronic warfare assets, 764 vehicles, 107 drones, 317 antennas, 983 enemy positions, 32 ammo depots, and 7 fuel depots, eliminating over 1,000 Russian troops. Ukraine's Security Service elite Alpha units are among the most capable special operations forces in the country. Trained for counterterrorism, sabotage, and high-risk missions, they play a key role in deep operations against Russian forces. Operating with speed and precision, Alpha teams often conduct raids, targeted eliminations, and covert strikes on enemy command centers and infrastructure. Their effectiveness lies in a combination of advanced training, modern equipment, and strict secrecy, making them one of the sharpest tools in Ukraine's defense arsenal. Russian war blogger Alexander Garmiev has published a photo showing what he says are 2 Ukrainian prisoners of war tied together with sticky tape, with one of them being made to hold a primed hand grenade, which will explode if either try to escape or if it is dropped. Garmiev writes, "A waltz performed by 2 crests, derogatory term for Ukrainians. Only those who pay close attention will understand that this dance cannot be completed without fatal consequences. The grenade, probably a Soviet-era RGD-5, could be defused by someone else putting the pin back in, but it's unclear how this situation ended. It's consistent with a long-running pattern of abuse and murder of Ukrainian prisoners by their Russian captors." EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said Russia will not get back its frozen assets in Europe unless it pays reparations to Ukraine. Politico earlier reported the EU is preparing to finalize plans to transfer about 200 billion euros into a fund for Ukraine's reconstruction.
So first, we are going to discuss Russia's war against Ukraine. What more can we do? We see that Russia does not want peace, although there are a lot of diplomatic efforts made to bring Zelensky and Russia to the table. Then, in relation to that, because it always comes up, we are going to have a deep dive into frozen assets issue. There are pros and cons. There are some sensitivities regarding this, but we really have to have argumented debate about this. What are the risks? Because we can't possibly imagine, we have to have an exit strategy. We can't possibly imagine that, if this there is ceasefire or a peace deal, that these assets are given back to Russia if they haven't paid for the reparations.
Putin arrived in China for a 4-day visit, set to attend the SCO summit and a military parade marking 80 years since the end of the Second World War. Beijing wants to showcase its military power to the U.S. Xi said China and Russia seek a new, fair world order. On September 3rd, Putin will stand alongside Xi, as well as the leaders of Iran and North Korea. One aspect rarely discussed is China's quiet interest in the war in Ukraine dragging on. A prolonged conflict keeps the United States and its allies heavily focused on supporting Kyiv, easing direct pressure on Beijing in the Pacific. At the same time, China benefits economically, expanding its dominance in global trade while securing Russian oil at discounted prices. The longer the war continues, the more room China has to strengthen its influence, build strategic leverage, and reshape global power balances to its advantage. At the UN Security Council, Ukrainian Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko showed the body of a child killed in a Russian strike. Russian representatives stared into their phones. A stark reminder. For Moscow, human life means nothing. Cynicism is their official policy.
Russia is recognized perpetrator of crimes against Ukrainian children. For the third consecutive year, Russia has been placed on the shame list in the Secretary General reports on children and armed conflict. Yesterday, Russia airstruck on Kiev killed 4 children. Since the beginning of Russian full-scale...
U.S. President Donald Trump is in talks with European allies about the possible deployment of private military companies in Ukraine after the signing of a peace agreement. The Telegraph reports. The use of a private army is seen as a way to fulfill Trump's promise not to send American troops into Ukraine, while providing an alternative form of support, the so-called deterrent. In Trump's view, the use of private military forces can help Ukraine build fortifications, restore defense infrastructure and military bases, and protect U.S. interests in the country. The presidential administration believes that the presence of such units could also be a signal to Russia to deter it from violating the ceasefire. According to the Telegraph, this plan is being discussed along with other security guarantee mechanisms that can be offered primarily by France and the United Kingdom. They should form the basis of a long-term peace plan for Ukraine. It is worth noting that U.S. President Donald Trump's position on the deployment of peacekeepers in Ukraine remains unclear. On the one hand, he confirmed that the United States would not deploy its own troops as part of a potential peacekeeping mission. At the same time, Trump declared his readiness to provide air support to the peacekeeping forces of a coalition of partner countries as part of a possible peace agreement with Russia. Although the president himself did not provide detailed comments, White House spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt told reporters that U.S. air support is an option and a possibility in the context of security guarantees for Ukraine. According to sources, Trump's position on deploying a peacekeeping contingent to Ukraine might have changed after his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. These talks, known as the 2025 Russia-United States Summit, were devoted to discussing ways to end the war in Ukraine and finding mechanisms to implement the ceasefire agreements. Earlier, Militarny reported that about 10 countries, after attracting support from the United States, were ready to send troops to Ukraine in the event of a peace agreement.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support Warthog Defense, please become our member and get early access to new videos, exclusive members-only videos, and become administrator in comment section. The membership link is in the description.
Rescues every day. We had a guy last week at 6 rescues in 6 days. You know, he's doing the job every day.